Ah, the American economy, a pristine example of a well-oiled machine, right? Or is it more like a car without brakes, hurtling down a hill, as storms and strikes put a temporary dent in hiring? Let's get real here. What we're witnessing is not just some unfortunate dip due to unpredictable weather or labor disruptions at a few companies. Oh no, this isn't as simple as a rainy day canceling your beach plans. It's symptomatic of something much bigger, much more insidious, lurking behind statistics and press conferences. And as usual, the government's response? A playbook we've seen before: interest rate shuffles, employment reports cherry-picked for good news, and economists attempting to rationalize it all. Let's dissect the real economic problems, and call out the systemic failures responsible for the current serious recession the U.S. seems to be stumbling toward. Buckle up, folks, it's going to be a bumpy ride through the clouds of economic nonsense. So, what's the big news? The October payroll report is out. And what does it say? Jobs are up by 105,000, way down from September's 254,000 increase, according to estimates. But economists were generous in their explanations, weren't they? Hurricanes Helene and Milton hit, a strike at Boeing lasted weeks, so hiring was temporarily hindered. Let me get this straight: 44,000 workers were affected by the Boeing strike, and the hurricanes broadly affected leisure and hospitality. Nice try, folks. Notice how no one mentioned structural problems like the dire state of manufacturing, underinvestment in tech and education, or a fragile supply chain that still hasn't healed since the pandemic. Yup, it's easier to blame the weather, right? Some even predict that payrolls will improve once things return to normal. How long have we been hearing that? Normal? In this economy? Keep dreaming. We'll come back to that later. But wait, there's more. Unemployment stays unchanged at 4.1%. Such a nice, clean number to broadcast in headlines, right? That's the number the public gets spoon-fed. It looks very stable, almost reassuring. But economists who've been paying attention, or at least pretending to, know that these numbers are based on two different surveys, one for payroll data and another for unemployment. And while everyone's eyes are glued to the headline jobless number, the real situation is much murkier. The labor force participation rate, still stuck at 62.7%, hasn't budged since September, and that's worrisome. Mathematically, if fewer people are actively participating in the labor force, either because they gave up or can't find jobs that they want, then unemployment looks artificially better than it really is. So, rather than cheering a stable 4.1%, we should be asking, where did all those people go? Ah yes, one of our favorite scapegoats, immigration. That's always a nice, easily digestible talking point. Some analysts suggest that the spike in unemployment earlier this year was, drumroll, because of immigrants. The theory goes that a flood of newcomers drove up the jobless rate, peaking at 4.3% in July. And now, it's assumed that easing border pressure will miraculously lead to better absorption of those new entrants into the labor market. Let's get one thing straight: immigration is a critical part of labor force growth, but pointing the finger here completely misrepresents the broader economic dysfunction. If labor conditions truly were strong, these new entrants should add productive capacity to the economy quickly, not result in a bloated unemployment rate. But we know that's not happening at a reasonable pace. The truth is, labor market rigidity is keeping wages high for those already in high-demand sectors, like tech or finance, while low-skilled jobs stay underpaid and unattractive. Who wants to flip burgers when inflation is chewing up what little real income growth there is? And speaking of wages, now we come to wages, the aspect of the economy that people feel most viscerally. It impacts their rent, groceries, kids' education, you name it. Economists are quick to point out that wage growth is trending at 4% for the last 12 months, decelerating to 0.3% in October. And even with the hurricanes supposedly leading to a temporary boost in hourly earnings due to shortened workweeks, the story here is not rosy. If wage growth remains strong, it's inflation's best friend. Yet, these wages are not keeping up with inflation, and here's the real kicker: city economists expect that a weakening labor market is putting downward pressure on wages. In other words, people will lose bargaining power, and wages will naturally flatten out as the economy slows further. Wonderful, right? We can't have runaway inflation, so the answer is for people to make less money. Who wins that game? Higher profit margins for corporations, shrinking paychecks for the rest of us, and skyrocketing costs of living. Let's not sugarcoat this. Federal Reserve officials are facing a lose-lose situation at their upcoming policy meeting. On November 6th to 7th, they're expected to authorize another rate cut, a quarter point this time, after launching a half-point reduction in September. Who's been paying attention, though? By lowering rates, the Fed is essentially acknowledging that the economic slowdown is real. Recessionary signals are flashing, and they're desperate to mount a defense. But in reality, we're just keeping the air in a bubble, the one inflated by cheap credit, market speculation, and corporate buybacks. The underlying economy, driven by actual productivity? Not so great. But what else can the Fed do? If they don't cut rates, we suffocate under high debt service costs. Damned if you lower rates, damned if you don't. Let's zoom out from the October specifics. This employment report is merely a symptom of a broader economic malaise, like a fever indicating an underlying infection. We're talking about deep structural problems, like 1. Automation and job polarization. Good-paying, moderate-skilled jobs are disappearing thanks to automation, leaving fewer opportunities for workers to upgrade their living standards. Technological change isn't just rapid, it's leaving whole sectors behind. 2. The gig economy. Sure, we can point to job growth, but let's not forget the rise of part-time, erratic gig work masking itself as new jobs. The gig economy just creates a further divide: no benefits, fewer rights, unsustainable income. Is this where we want the future of work to go? 3. Underinvestment in human capital. U.S. infrastructure, both physical and human, is woefully underfunded. Education, skills training, affordable healthcare, and housing are falling far behind what's needed to sustain a prosperous, innovative workforce. 4. Income inequality. Even as certain sectors rebound, like tech or finance, overall inequality gets worse. CEOs reap multi-million-dollar bonuses while frontline workers struggle paycheck to paycheck. The system is optimized for those who already have wealth to grow it. October might be the month where the media can safely point fingers at hurricanes and strikes, but let's not kid ourselves. The U.S. economy has been limping along for years, failing to address deep imbalances. The labor market's tepid recovery has been uneven, wage growth is mostly illusory, and unemployment stats are cleverly disguised with half-truths. And here is where our government steps in, either by cutting interest rates to scrape by in the short term, or spinning underwhelming payroll reports as outliers caused by uncontrollable factors like storms. Can we see through the smoke and mirrors yet? We can speculate all day about Federal Reserve decisions and temporarily weak employment numbers, but the truth is, the U.S. economy is facing long-term obstacles that require deep reforms, not superficial rate cuts or temporary hiring boosts before elections. If we don't recognize these truths, we're heading for bigger problems. The cracks in the foundations are spreading. Whether it's the housing affordability crisis, a student debt bubble, or the gigification of our entire labor market, these issues can't be brushed away with excuses like weather-related job losses or short-term hiring trends. Without meaningful policy change, investment in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and a serious effort at wage equity, the storm we fear isn't in the weather forecast. It's an economic recession, the product of years of neglect, short-term thinking, and an over-reliance on monetary policy gimmicks. Wake up, America. The employment report is just a snapshot. It's the deeper, structural issues that will decide whether we're heading toward a solvable crisis, or a complete collapse.